You got the recording sign?
Yeah.
All right. Do you still agree to consent to record this podcast?
Yes.
And for me to distribute this podcast on various platforms?
Yes.
All right, everyone. Welcome, Lieutenant Sharpless. How are you, ma'am?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm right. It's pretty early. My little girl's downstairs and I made her some chocolate milk and she's watching her little shows and stuff like that. So she might knock on the door. You might.
I hope so. Bring some spice to it.
Yeah. You just never know what's going to happen. So we're doing this podcast. I think the overall theme of this is sort of like, ethics. I think I said like equality, fairness. These are all like ideas that I think are not only subjective, but I think that, they're in the news all the time today about what this is and everything. But before we get into that, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? Like where you're from? What was it like for you growing up?
Yeah. So I was born in Maryland, and then when I was 8, we moved to Pennsylvania for my dad's work. He worked in insurance. And so I see myself primarily as a Pennsylvanian. I grew up in a suburb of Philadelphia, went to a place called Conestoga High School, where I was really challenged. Main activities, I just really love music. So I was involved in a lot of music ensembles. Marching band was like my crowd, and nerded out with all of the marching band geeks. And then went to college, did ROTC.
Okay, let's stop right there. Why ROTC?
Sorry.
Why'd you do the military?
I did the military. So it's a funny story. I played rugby in high school for a couple of years before I tore my ACL, actually. And there was a older teammate that was interested in doing ROTC while I was a junior. And I really looked up to her. So, I kind of said to myself, well, if you're interested in this, I'm interested in this because I want to be you, essentially.
Right.
So that's what really caused me to look into it. And then once I looked into it and understood what ROTC even meant, and what it meant to be an officer in the military, I realized that it aligned with my personal values and ideological beliefs about, believing in the United States as a project and something that's like worth defending, I guess.
Yeah, no, that's great. I feel the same way. That's great.
Yeah, so that's what brought me into it.
What'd your family think when you approached them with this idea? Because I'm guessing your family, you're the first one to serve, or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, no, I am. Yeah, good guess. Basically, my mom went to art school. My sisters are both actors, so I'm really the odd one out doing this track. But my family was definitely taken aback, and I do still have family members who, while they love me and are supportive of all the decisions I've made, sometimes wish maybe that I'm not in Korea, for example, or involved in the military in a way that could put me in harm's way potentially. And I totally respect that, understand that. But I think that was a shock to them. And then my mom, she wanted to make sure, because with ROTC, you can apply for a scholarship to go to school. And I got that scholarship, and she wanted to make sure that I wasn't doing it to pay for school, or doing it, for the money aspect of it, because she thought I might do something like that so that she wouldn't have to support me in college or something. But I assured her it was not for that reason. And I think my other family members have gotten at least used to the idea of me in the military now.
Yeah. I mean, it's been a little while now. So let's play a game here. If you could somehow magically, or maybe you've had this conversation, you can get into the heads of your parents. What do you think they expected or would have wanted for you to choose besides the Army?
Yeah, well, I think they're happy with me going to college, and that I definitely followed their expectation in that regard. I think they expected me to just go to school and allow myself to be exposed to a lot of different career tracks and different majors, and kind of just have that stereotypical college experience. I think post-college, my parents probably expected me to apply to grad school right off the bat, maybe go to law school and become a lawyer and continue going down that track. But I did think even with our ROTC, that I would want to pursue like law school later down the
Yeah.
line and go along that trajectory.
Is
But
that something you still think about, or?
no.
Yeah. It seems boring to me.
Mainly,
I don't know.
yeah. I totally respect people who do it, and some people are
Yes.
really into it. But I'm gonna be honest, there are a lot of people I think who apply to go to graduate school right out of college because they don't know what else to do and they
Mm.
don't know what career they want to start off with. And obviously that's not everybody, but for me, I knew I was going to the military, and then over COVID, I really had this like personal time for reflection and realized that the difference between what I was taught to want and maybe what I actually wanted.
Mm.
And I think that helped me get a lot of clarity with my trajectory, and it did not include law school.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Well, that's a good thing
yeah,
you found that out when you did. Maybe some people are in, like, their middle stages of life when they kind of discover these
yeah,
things.
yeah. And I really am grateful for that reason for COVID, even though like I feel so bad for everybody who's lost somebody or the impact it had in such personal ways for a lot of people. But at the same time, I think it like collectively gave our society space to just like calm down for a second, and everybody found a hobby, and everybody maybe rediscovered like the value of the everyday and making it work on the everyday. So I think a lot of good came out of that for a lot of people I know.
Yeah, I remember thinking somewhere along that line, like, hey, things are going to be different when we get out of it, because people have had this time to like reflect, and you sort of see that with the what's the term they're using? The Great Migration? No, it's about all the
Mm.
people not returning to work. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I had a discussion about this with my friend, and she was saying that people are realizing that whatever path they were on, you know, it's the wrong path. And I think that's happening, but I think that this is just a blip. I think we
Mm.
we hit a speed bump and everything is going right back to where it is. Because I don't know, I'm not trying to be like negative or pessimistic, but I'm looking at human nature. I study psychology. People go back to what they know. So yes, you're probably some people on a crusade to maybe find themselves or find some form of happiness or meaning in their life. But I think the machine is too powerful. You got to pay your bills. You got to, especially if you're married, you got kids. I don't know if
Yeah.
this change is long lasting, is what I'm saying. And how do you
Yeah.
feel? Did you
I could
disagree
see
or?
that. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Maybe the majority of people will go back and be tied back into, our capitalistic system that demands a lot of
Another cog in the
productivity. And
system, yeah.
yeah, exactly. I also think though that maybe there's that group of people who, hadn't been in the workforce, but are now entering the workforce. And during those couple of years, when we had COVID, they had be going through school or maybe getting out of high school or whatever, and they never knew what it was like to be in those
Mhm.
workplaces. So
So
maybe
weren't
for
tainted.
them it might be different. Yeah, maybe for them there's nothing to go back to except what they knew during COVID. So maybe that will cause some change like many many years down the line.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I think even if functionally like our lives look the same and we go through the same motions, I hope that at least internally people approach life in maybe a little bit different way. So we'll see.
I hope so. I hope so. Yeah, I do. I really pray for that. I hope that there's some sort of, I don't know, like a renaissance or something. So I
Yeah.
want to share this. We can move on after this. But I want to share something. I have a friend that works. Let me not say where they work, but it's a government
Mhm.
type job,
Mhm.
right? It's one that you traditionally figure that people need to be at this location to do it, right? Even with all
Mhm.
technology and stuff like that nowadays, right? So when this happened, obviously they shut down all these places because they were in a blue state.
Mhm.
And they realized that productivity went up when people were working from
Mhm.
home. And
Mhm.
besides this evidence glaring in their face that the productivity went up, they kept
Yeah.
fighting and fighting to get everybody back in the office. And now they're 100% back in the office.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. And I think there have been studies even past about having like the 4-day work week and how that increases productivity overall as well. And I think like you're saying, there's that habit forming throughout life that we think the way we learned it is the only way to do it. And I think there's this really great fear of trying something new in case it fails. But even if
Yes.
it failed, that's just more information to inform you like going
Yes.
forward. So it's a win. But I think it's really hard, especially if you're in the seat of a higher level, and the success or failure of a company is like on your shoulders.
True.
What are you
True.
gonna do? Like do the way that has been at least tried regularly to show that there are results, or go out on a limb and then be blamed if it goes wrong. I can see that pressure, but I wish it wasn't like that. And I wish that everybody had that space to maybe experiment a little bit more and follow that evidence like you're talking about.
Okay, I want to share something about leadership, something that I just
Mm,
realized. 45 years old,
mhm.
and I've been in a lot of like leadership positions and different
Yeah.
like endeavors and stuff like that. And I was listening to a podcast and I just realized something. And I think this it goes to what you're talking about, like why we sort
Mhm,
of go back, perhaps.
mhm,
So when you're that person, right? You're in charge of something. Let's say a platoon leader, like you would be,
yeah.
right?
Mhm,
And you're doing certain things with your platoon. You're the person in charge, and you have people above you, right?
mhm,
They're not maybe necessarily telling you what to do, but they're sort of bringing up questions. So the example that I heard of, the person was a showrunner. I'm not going to mention what show they were on. They were a showrunner.
mhm.
If you're a showrunner, the people above you at the studios, whatever, they give you what is called notes. You've heard this
Mhm.
term before, notes, like you're producing a show, whatever, and they start giving you notes like, maybe you should add a puppy, or
Yep.
maybe they should kiss at the end of the episode, or they start giving you
Mhm.
these notes, right? I think in our situation, me as an enlisted person, you as an officer, we have our leaders, and they may not necessarily tell you this is what you should do, but they start to say things, and we interpret that as like, this is what we should do. But listening to
Right.
this podcast, I never thought about it this way. And I think this person, like, it just really opened up my mind. They said,
Mhm.
you don't have to listen to the notes.
Mhm.
The notes are not there to help you. The notes are
Mhm.
there to cover your leadership's ass. So if like say
Mm.
your mission fails, they'll be like, well, yeah, I told them to, or the show it's not a successful show. The
Right.
leadership could say, well, yeah, I told them this is just a way to cover their butt. It just, I don't know. I just feel like, wow.
Yeah, and that's interesting because at the end of the day, like it keeps going up and up and up,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I'm not anywhere close to the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the leadership chain in the military. And everybody, like my most senior leaders that I will ever talk to are still answering to somebody else who gave
Yeah.
them those notes.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really interesting that honestly, from my vantage point, stems from a mentality of fear and a feeling of being surveilled and having to answer to somebody instead of like a more team oriented like excitement and motivation to just make life better for people. So I think it's difficult, and I definitely, going into that seat as a platoon leader, like you talked about, want to prioritize not acting out of fear of retribution from my leadership or
Right.
something like that for not
Or
following
so
through on
focused on
what's
your career that you forget about your soldiers, right? Because I think that happens a
exactly.
lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like 98% of lieutenants get promoted. So luckily I don't
Yeah,
have to be too obsessed with it right now. And obviously have to follow what's, legal, moral, and ethical. But I definitely want to try to remember to be more of that team oriented instead of, that
yeah,
leadership chain oriented. So
yeah. I think you just opened up the door to get for us to get into ethics. But I want to start with you.
yeah.
Explain to the people who are listening, what is the ethics bow? I saw that on your thing. What is that? How did that start?
Yeah, so Ethics Bowl overall, it's actually a relatively new competition style event, and I did in high school. And essentially, you have one team, and it will be maybe 3 to 5 people against another team, and you come into a space and you have this ethical dilemma that's posed to both teams. It might be, one example was during Hurricane Katrina, a lot of power went out. Especially at hospitals, and a lot of hospitals had to make a decision of, with this limited energy we have from maybe backup generators or something like that, how do we allocate care, and how do we allocate scarce resources that might otherwise not be scarce. And so that's one example of the type of moral dilemma that you might think through. And one team will just present, their approach to it and their solution, maybe to a few questions that are brought up, and then another team will respond. And then they'll have a panel of judges who also kind of questions that original team. Then it switches for a different moral dilemma, and then you're kind of evaluated. But what I think really characterizes Ethics Bowl in a unique way is the fact that it's a conversation. It's not, a super. You are competitive, but you have to be polite. You're actually, evaluated on how well you engage versus being more confrontational. And I think it's really opened me up to really question some of my core beliefs and be able to approach maybe some really sensitive topics with a feeling of, I don't know what is right, but I'm willing to try to figure out with you, even the team that you're competing against. Yeah. So I did that in high school. We had a lot of success there. We went to nationals actually, which was a really exciting time for us. And then I came to college and there was no team. And I felt like the first couple of years of college, I was just trying to find, my
And this
place,
is at Harvard?
Yeah. So
I would think a place like that would have I'm sure they have a debate team, right?
Yeah,
okay,
for sure. That's what my mom said. She was like, I can't believe they don't have it. Like, me neither. But
well, a great opportunity for you, because now you're the founder of this team, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. But I did check out the debate team. Or at least talk to people who are on the debate team to learn a little bit more about it. I tried a couple like societies that had kind of that conversational aspect to it. And I just realized that, Ethics Bowls are real. It's just such a special space to really not take things personally, but also be extremely personally invested. And I think that's a really tough balance to strike with sensitive topics, and to have the opportunity as like the founder to try to set a specific tone within our team of, look, it's not all about the competition. It's not all about winning. Like, this is actually just about our personal growth and like trying to bring
say that. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. And like trying to bring this skill set to our communities and having these conversations both in our club, but also, in the dining hall with somebody who's not even part of the club, or,
or
with our professors, or on a podcast. Exactly. And I really think that there are some spaces where it's like extremely focused on a topic or skill set that might not translate to an everyday conversation like this. And I just think, contrastingly, that's the essence of Ethics Bowl. It's like the stuff that matters on a daily basis. So
I think this is the way everyone should approach life. Like, I get the debate thing, because the debate thing is sort of like, it's more of a let's win, let's crush the other team. But this is all about a free flow of idea of information for our personal growth, or for societal like growth. I hate that we're in this cancel culture type of thing right now. It's like, because we bring up a topic, me and you are talking about whatever, and someone hears it, whatever it is, whatever they're triggered or they're feeling about whatever we're talking about. Just because someone is talking about a topic that's a hot topic doesn't mean, let's say we're talking about race or sexism or whatever, it doesn't mean that we feel a certain way or we belong to a certain group. The freedom to just talk about things, explore ideas, is being taken away from us. And I think this is a great idea now. Let's have these ethic bowls. Let's throw out tough things, like gender and all the stuff that's going on today. But people are afraid to even have these conversations. How did you guys even get away with this?
I mean, I think luckily, we weren't the people who started Ethics Bowl generally. So there was definitely a community we were able to tap into, like in other colleges, especially in the Boston area. We, looped in with Northeastern at one point, and reached out to Tufts because they have a pretty good Ethics Bowl team, and just tried to learn more about how to approach and start something like this. But, the conversations themselves that you have, even at a place like Harvard, somebody might think, oh my gosh, you guys are so like hyper intellectual. And I'm sure like just had a really like, philosophical discussion about this. And I was like, that's not how it is. Like, I take things personally, other people take things personally. And at the end of the day, like, even though we're getting this top-notch education, like, people still have their biases, and people still have
probably super competitive, I would think.
Yeah. and that can translate to like a defensiveness that
Yeah.
you almost have to say like, no, that's not what we're doing here. Like I get it. I I feel for you and I have empathy for you, but at the same time, like that's not what we want to go for right now. And I think just trying to approach it from that point of view is sometimes really difficult, but I think also worth it. And what you're saying with people not being able to, kind of broach some topics, or maybe people feeling triggered, I think that's super valid for people to like, have emotional responses to things, especially if they like went through personal experiences that kind of hit home for them. But at the same time, I think, if you kind of cultivate an intentional space that
Mhm.
people choose to enter into, to discuss these things, it's a resource for us to just collectively figure out this mess of life and like figure out what is happening, and maybe just change your mind. And I think having like kind of putting your ego aside and really just being
That's
open
hard
to
to
having
do.
your, yeah, like being open to change your mind, but like you're saying, also being open to express yourself and say like, look, I don't know if this is right, and I apologize if I insult or offend somebody, but like I'm willing to learn and willing to like hear what you have to say, but this is what I believe. And I think we like 80% of the time on a daily basis, we don't even feel comfortable to do that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it has to do with uncertainty. I think people
Mm,
are, life is chaotic, if you really think about it, because we're born into this world. Where were we before we got here? Where are we going after?
mhm.
And there's no
Yeah,
manual for how to live
yeah,
this life.
yeah.
And I think that sort of chaoticness, people don't like to. So we make up stories, which is fine. Whatever,
Mhm.
whatever grounds you and makes you a calm and decent person, that's fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that another person can't have different views that challenge your views. And
Mhm.
I think that's what really makes people anxious. And then they sort of lash out and behave
Yeah.
in ignorant ways too. I mean, I don't know any other way to say it, but I think it's just ignorance.
Right. I mean, I completely agree. And I think you see it, maybe on the day to day, but then how the day to day interpersonal relations and how we approach conversations can get reflected on the national stage. And I think
Mm-hmm.
honestly, like that's what I mean, I know regardless of which side of the aisle people stand on, like watching the past most recent presidential debates, that was rough. That was
Yeah.
rough to watch. Like that was definitely not a conversation by any means of the imagination. And so I think you really see these micro interactions that are reflected at the more high stake, large scale, more nationally visible interactions. And so I really think that we have the power to reshape the way we approach these conversations, just between everyday people like you and me, that hopefully could cascade to,
Yeah.
bigger, higher level conversations.
I'm hoping to do that. That's one of the big reasons why I'm doing this podcast, because I'm
Yeah.
so sick and tired of turning on the news or whatever talk shows. And it's
Mhm.
like the same people. They're so
Right.
pretty. The
Yeah.
way they
Yep.
talk is so like very specific, and they keep saying the
Right.
same things. And I don't think it's
Yep.
reflective of how the general population feels, acts, or thinks at all.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I agree. And so it's definitely important. Like I appreciate what you're doing here for sure.
Oh,
And
thank
I
you.
hope that like these conversations continue. Yeah.
Changing the world, man. One podcast at a time.
You and me.
All right, let's go into you, because you're a young person, right? You go to this college, very elite college, and I'm guessing you have a very strong competitive nature. Because from what I understand, to get into these Ivy League schools, like you might have to kill somebody. I don't know if that's true.
I can't
I'm
talk
just
about
throwing that out there. So, okay, like you get there, and COVID happens, right? This is college. I don't know Harvard, but I'm guessing it's like other. You guys are still young people. You guys wanted to party, go out
Yeah.
drinking, do some stuff, right? But then COVID happens. When does COVID happen when you're in school?
Yeah, so
About,
that happened my junior spring,
oh wow,
actually.
right towards the
March,
end.
right before
Jeez.
spring break. Yeah.
Wow. Did you have
Yeah.
any plans for spring break that year or?
Oh gosh. Thinking back to it, no, I really think I was just gonna go home.
Yeah.
I think maybe I was trying to maybe work out something with a couple friends, but that quickly went down the drain.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
how'd you spend it? You just like in your dorm room, or did you get to go home or?
No, so basically the weekend before spring break, we were told you need to get off campus, you need to pack up all your stuff,
Oh wow.
and you need to
Big
go home. And if
exodus.
you,
Ah, okay.
yeah, and if you can't go home because you don't have a home, or because besides school at this point in time, or because of, you know, extenuating circumstances, you have to go through official channels to get that approval to stay.
Uh,
And it was really tough. It was just complete and utter shock, as to, you know, what I thought the year was gonna look like. And everybody was like, okay, it'll just be spring break and then we'll come back to campus.
right.
Or,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, as time went on, it'll just be the semester, it'll just be
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
summer.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you kind of get to this point, and the toughest point for me was senior spring, when
Mhm.
it was still happening. It'd been a full year, and we still weren't getting, you know, that regular graduation. Other colleges had started to do that. They, you know, were
Mhm.
just really distanced in like a stadium, but we still only had like a virtual graduation. Usually there's a whole week, you know, for seniors to
Well,
just
let's
socialize.
take it back.
We
So,
didn't have that
what, I
either.
mean, what are you feeling like when? So it's spring break.
Mhm.
Classes start back up, but everything is virtual. Like, what are you feeling at that time? Are you hopeful, or you're like
Yeah, I think I was just in denial. Like I
good
personally,
old denial? Yeah, it's
yeah.
helpful. It's helpful.
I mean, I'm personally like to think of myself as a fairly optimistic person, and so even just staring down like the worst case scenario, I always think and say, "Oh, it's gonna get better." Like this is the worst it could get. Like
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes that's a helpful mentality to have, and sometimes I'm just wrong. And in this case, I was wrong.
yeah,
And I think there's a lot of fear. I had a lot of confusion. I think nobody understood the nature of the virus,
yeah,
of, you know, how it would affect like our economy, our, you know,
yeah.
even just our lives. So I think there
I
was a
think there was a
period
lot
of
of
time.
mistakes made, but
Yes,
then again, hindsight is 2020, so it's hard to like
yes,
judge people. If you were
for
in that
sure.
shoes, what decisions might you have made? Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you know, at that time I was just looking for answers, and there wasn't anybody who could really provide those, without five other people who seemed just as respectable saying something
yeah,
different.
yeah.
So
But as a young woman, right? You're getting towards the end now of school. You had a history of going to high school, going to college. You're in a class with your professors, with your friends, and now all of a
mhm.
sudden you're home and you're doing everything virtual. Like, what are you thinking? What are you feeling at that time? Did you miss having the interaction with your professor and your friends, or like what's going on?
Yeah. So I was lucky in a certain regard. I actually went home with a friend. I didn't go to my home just because
Oh,
it
okay.
wouldn't have been like the best spot for me at that time. And so went home with a friend, and she lived in North Carolina, like had a lake in her backyard. So it
Oh,
was
geez. You were rough. You
really,
had it
yeah,
tough. Yeah.
I know. So, you know, with that and having a friend there, I think made it a lot easier. But I think I was frustrated. I was really angry. I felt as though, you know, why me, even though
Love it.
literally, yeah, I was safe and healthy. And I was going through these courses that I was super invested in. However, I was just so confused why we were still pretending that everything was all right, and like still pursuing that level of rigor even in a virtual environment that maybe I would experience on campus, but without
Mm,
the same outlets and resources to succeed that I would have on campus. And professors definitely catered how they were teaching to that environment a little bit more and were easier on us, but it was still hard, and it was still just staring at a screen all day, trying to be engaged while you're worried about, you know, your grandfather or your mom or your
yeah,
siblings.
yeah.
And, you know, it's just this anger of like, why why are we trying to pursue a semblance of normalcy when this situation is so abnormal? I think was that create this dissonance for me that was hard to cope with. So
Yeah, yeah. I think we don't know what else to do at those times, which is,
yeah.
for us being in the military is why you train a certain way. Like you train the way you're gonna fight, right? Because
Hmm.
in intense situations, you don't want to have to think. You want to just have
Yeah.
to act, like just it's muscle
Hmm.
memory. It's just built into you. And yeah, I mean, it's a good tool to have, but at the same time, going back to what we were saying, maybe we can't do that again. Maybe normal is not
Yeah.
okay
Hmm.
in this situation, But I love how you said, I think human beings, we do this all the time. Why me? Why did it
Yeah.
happen to me? Why not you, asshole? What makes you
Yeah,
so
exactly.
special? and,
Yeah.
and I'm not a gazelle or some kind of animal like that. But I think when the lion eats them, I don't know if they go, "Oh, why me?" I don't know. I don't know. I think just human beings like,
Maybe.
why me?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah,
ego.
for
I think it's
sure.
all ego.
Yeah. 100%. I mean, we are the protagonists of our own stories, and that's
Yeah.
the only story that we have as intimate access to. And I think that, yeah, everything in my life happens in relationship to me, and taking a step back in those tough moments is important to do. And I don't think I fully succeeded at that point in time, but I'm trying.
No. You
Yeah.
failed in a way that humans fail. And I think that makes you, like I said, human. It's just, I
Yeah.
probably would have done this. I think everyone did. I don't know. And in a way, I kind of was like, because I'm I guess an extroverted introvert. Like I love to write. I love
Mm,
quiet time to write, but I love to
hmm.
do this like and talk to people. So I just kind of made the best of it. And in a way,
Yeah. I
I
mean,
felt looking back. I'm sorry. I look back at it, and I felt sort of guilty that I was
mm,
having this fun. Like you know what
okay.
I mean? But so many people, like you're watching the news, like had tough times and stuff like that. And it took a while for me to go, oh, like I don't know, like this kind of guilt just came late, like a year into it, came like, this is
Mm.
not good. Maybe I shouldn't be like enjoying this so much. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, how was it for you with your family? I don't know how many kids do you have?
Two kids, a
Two
dog
kids.
and a cat.
Okay. Wow. Yeah,
It was
and
tough.
where were you at that time?
We're here in
Okay.
South Korea. We're living in a smaller apartment. We have a house now. We have a big house, 2 floors, and a big old backyard, and like sort of like a gated
Hmm.
community where all the kids can like kind of play. We're sort of like in a little bubble. So once we moved here
Hmm.
after the first year of COVID, things improved for them.
Hmm.
But that first year
Right.
of my wife had to become a teacher, and a lot of
Well.
people had to take on that role who are not prepared for that role. There are
Hmm.
in my opinion, there are very few people who are cut out to be teachers.
Mm,
Is very
hmm.
difficult. There's a lot of people in that
Yeah.
job doing that job, but they're not
Yes.
really the best of a teacher. So it was tough. Like I said, I think for them, it's hard to say because they're so young. What kind of
Hmm.
an effect it had on them. They seem fine, but I don't know. There's this thing. I was watching a show, something called, I think, the knowledge gap. Have you heard this
Mm,
term? The
I have
knowledge
heard of
gap?
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Hmm.
it's hard to say because my son is doing really well. My daughter's just there.
Hmm.
So I don't know. Maybe we just lucked out.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. But I can't imagine having little kids and trying to explain to them what's happening and trying to see if they're able to even conceptualize it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure they miss their friends and stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think we're good. I think I was good. I think my kids were good. My wife,
okay.
not so much. Poor woman.
Okay.
I'm telling you, I'm gonna buy her like an award presented to her because
Yeah.
besides being a great woman, a great wife, that she survived through all that and kept us going. She
Yeah.
really deserves something, everything. She deserves everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's go into when I first met you. The topic of selective service came up, and I guess you did your thesis on this. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So basically, for my major, I had to write a thesis in order to graduate at school. So not all majors are like that. And I knew what I was getting myself into. So yeah, I wrote it's like 120-page basically piece of work on the selective service in the United States. And my main argument was that all citizens, without regard to gender, should be subject to registration with the United States Selective Service System.
Did you get any pushback on
And
that or what?
um, honestly, no, because I think most people, like, they'll hear your topic, and whether or not they agree with it, they'll be like, oh, that's cool that you're addressing
Doing
that
that,
issue.
right?
And like, maybe we'll talk about it, but people weren't upset that I was just writing about it overall.
Okay.
And I was able to work with a great professor, Professor Robichaud, And he helped me to kind of discover the history behind the selective service system, and how basically the regulations that we see today, which is essentially all men above the age of 18 within the United States, and men as in, sex assigned at birth, must be registered with the selective service system. And if you come from a different country and you're not born as a U.S. citizen, in order to become a U.S. citizen, it's actually a requirement as well. That
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah, they have to be registered. And even if you are disabled, you and would be, hypothetically, physically unable to serve in the military, you still have to register. So.
Okay, so you just kind of brought up something. I don't know if you want to go here, but what if you were assigned a female at birth and then later transition? What'd your research show that? Do you have to sign up?
No, it's only if it's sex assigned at birth. So you could have, and this is actually something I brought up within my thesis to kind of illustrate how, maybe not nuanced this regulation is the fact that you could have somebody who transitions to be a female and was assigned male at birth, and they physically might have all of the characteristics of female body, and might have gone through hormonal transitions, and they still could be registered with the draft and potentially
could they be forced to, or because I never heard of anyone forced. I know a lot of people who've never registered.
Yeah, well, I know that you should.
Okay. We'll get into that later. I got more stuff.
No. It's more of like legally you're supposed to.
Right. Like jaywalking. You're not supposed to jaywalk either. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the enforcement system with that. I assume it's something like similar, akin to the IRS. Like there's probably a small group of people who have to pursue that, but I think you have until a certain age to register as well. I believe it's 25 or 28,
and then they just kind of forget about you.
I don't know, there might be penalties for that, but
but if you want to vote, I know that you're gonna have to register.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So maybe that's the way that you have to do. I know a lot of some states, it's the same time that you get your driver's license. So it's an automatic.
Yeah, they might get you right there. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think every state is a little different.
Yeah. So it's an interesting system. I'm going to look into the enforcement policy for them. Actually, now.
Yeah, good. I opened up a new avenue for you. But here's this, right? I'm going to be a little bit provocative here. So, you consider yourself a feminist?
Yes, but I think there's a lot of different.
It's a broad, different. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. Okay, I know that. So here we go. Here's my thing, right? If a person considers themselves a feminist, I'm thinking that they're considering themselves, they want to be treated equal and considered equal as men. But I don't see any feminists on any of these talk shows saying, we need to do the selective service too type thing. Is that sort of like a problem with feminism, or what would you say? I'm sorry for not giving you an easy question.
Oh, no. I like questions like that. I might not have the most succinct response, but I'll try to figure it out. Basically, how I see it is not that, based off of okay, how do I say this? So the equal treatment argument, for example, can be problematic in some regards, because it's not that everybody should be treated the exact same way, like in a way that's not responsive to who they are as a person, or the actions that they do within their life, or the actions that they don't take in their life. So, if I don't have a certain qualification, whether it's, physical or academic or fill in the blank, to, get a job, for example, like I should not necessarily be given that job, because that's like equal treatment for a colleague who's able to meet those standards, who might happen to be male. And so it's more of like, if I check certain boxes, and if this person checks certain boxes, I should be treated in the same regard as that person, if we are like indeed identical, but the only difference is basically what's in our pants. Like I
Yeah,
think
yeah, yeah,
that
yeah.
that's like where I kind of come from with it, and I think that's fair to say, and I think it's about fairness for me rather than like a strict
Yeah.
equal treatment. Um,
But we didn't
and
talk, but I'm guessing your stance is women should have to do the selective service the same as men, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Okay.
I believe like all citizens, because and that's rooted less in a, oh, because they have to, I have to, and more of my definition of citizenship within the United States. And I basically approached it as, to register with the selective service system, similar to a duty such as,
Yeah.
paying your taxes,
Voting.
is right. That is
Yeah.
a expression of our citizenship within the United States. That is a way in which we are reaffirming kind of that status within
Yeah.
society to, um, you know,
Participating in this American experiment, right?
yeah, and
I hear
participate.
you.
And that to me, that's like democracy, to be a part of it and to actually participate. And in a system that depends on that participation, as it defines citizenship, to not be able to participate means that you're a lesser citizen and that you're being
Mm,
framed and treated as a lesser citizen. So it's less
wow.
about, because they are, I need to, and more about, well, what is citizenship, and are you allowing others more access to it than a different group based off of certain criteria.
Yeah, I
um,
think I'm following you, and I think I sort of agree with you. But let's want to get a little bit deeper. What about the ACFT? Now that they changed it, right? It
yeah.
used to be right, no gender, no age, right? It was just like, can you perform a task, or like you were kind of saying, check a box or not.
Hmm.
And I think what they found was a lot of, okay, I'm going to say women could not in these like jobs of like, I guess the combat
Hmm.
MOSs, right? We're not meeting that
Hmm.
standard. So then is the standard accurate, or are we just
Hmm.
changing things to include women?
Yeah, I think no, I actually did touch on this a little bit within my research as well. And, I'm still struggling with, having a discrete response to this. But from my vantage point, I really liked the fact that they were trying to make it gender neutral, and to make it, something that was being framed as like, we're measuring how well prepared you are for a job, not necessarily, how well prepared of a female you are for a job.
Right, exactly.
um,
Yeah.
and so I really appreciate that. However, the part that is kind of makes this a more difficult topic is the fact that physical fitness scores are so emphasized as a measurement of promotion potential within the military.
Mm-hmm.
And how, if you have scales that are gender neutral, you know, based off of the typical, I don't know, maybe a, it's so hard to say that like any body, just because it's like seen as man or woman, like is, going to be more capable. But you I think it's safe to say that the large group of people who identify as female and the large group of people who define as men, like the norms are the standards for women is that on average they're able to achieve less with the same amount of training as a man,
Okay.
typically.
Okay.
And I think that, like, based off of our physiology, and I think that's fair to say based off just how fast women's bodies with a certain mix of hormones is able to recover from working out, etc., how fast our muscles regenerate, and the types of workouts that women's bodies respond to versus male bodies.
Oh wow, you're
So
going
I
pretty
think,
deep into it.
yeah. So
Yeah, yeah.
I think that's where I'm comfortable to say like there is, a baseline difference. However, that's not to say it's impossible, for somebody like me to achieve a certain standard that might just be seen as abnormal for a female. But if I'm given the proper training, if I invest in it, I can hit that standard. So I'm trying to say, taking a step back, is
Yeah, yeah.
that
Long story
um,
short here.
long story short, I think when it comes to the promotion boards and evaluating men and women, and however you identify in between, like along the same scale, women on average will seem like, less competitive candidates than a man if you really emphasize physical fitness scores. However, I think that, we should approach in the military the mindset of, this is the standard that we have researched that it actually does take to do this job. Not, we think, or, it seems, or I feel like, but like actually research, this is what it takes to do this job. This is a test that actually measures your ability to do this job.
Right.
And when it comes to promotions, it can still be taken into account, but maybe it's not, a large factor so that you can still compensate for that difference. Or maybe there are other factors.
Let me explain the way the Navy did it, because I spent a long time in the Navy. It blew my mind that these PT scores mattered so much for your promotion, especially young and enlisted people, and not even just your promotion, but just how you were viewed. It's almost like, oh, this guy's a great athlete. They're an amazing leader and know how to do their job. Like, no. So this is what we did in the Navy. We set a number, right? A standard. We could argue whether that's an accurate judgment, whatever. We're not going to go down that road. Your score had nothing to do with your evaluation for, your NCOERs or promotions, had nothing to do with it. It only, can you pass or fail? If you fail, now we have a problem. If you pass, okay, now you're in the group of people who are passed, who are going to be judged sort of evenly. You guys all pass. Whether you pass with a 180 or a 300, really didn't matter. We're looking at other aspects. How well do you do your job? Or if you're in a leadership position, how well do you navigate the troubles of that? Like managing your people plus the stress of whatever, so the PT or the physical fitness is in it, but sort of indirectly. That makes sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and I would be interested to see, from your perspective, or if there are any kind of, measurements taken afterwards to see if on average people like were still doing well, or if there was a lot of people who didn't invest in their physical fitness as much afterwards, or what do you think?
I thought for my time, maybe things are different now, but when I first joined in 97. So that's a long time ago, man.
Yeah.
So we didn't PT really as a group. You didn't come in the morning, have formation, and everybody's going to PT for an hour and a half, and then, go take a shower, eat, and then come to work. We didn't do that. Staying physically fit was something you did on your own. And to be honest with you, my memory, if I take that snapshot of my first 4 years in the Navy compared to a snapshot of my first 4 years in the Army, those guys in the Navy were way more fit, and got less injured because there's benefits to group PT, but in general, I don't think what you need to do and what I need to do is different. You might need to work on some more resistance training, or maybe I need to do some more long distance runs, and fitting everybody into one little mold is just not good. And, the answer that the Army has for that, which I hate, is, well, this is for sustainment. Go ahead and PT on your own time. You know what I mean? Like, good. Take more hours out of my day that I don't have.
Right.
Thank you.
Right. And we're already getting up early. Why don't you just let me do like a worthwhile workout that won't make me need to do a different sustainment workout if I'm already doing good workout, versus the other way, where if you're just doing that, you have to do another one.
If I ever would have gotten the power to do this, and I know people have talked about this, but I don't know if anyone ever got the power to do this, it would have been where once a month I PT my squad or my platoon, a physical, whether it's the ACFT or APFT, once a month. And as long as you're good, you pass, for the rest of that month, we'll show up our formation. Bye.
Yeah.
Now, the people who don't, that's a different thing, because obviously I need to hold your hand. You need a little bit more instruction. But as long as you're passing, you're in good physical health, you know what you're doing. I don't need to be standing over your shoulder.
Yeah, I think that's a worthwhile approach for sure.
All right, we're running out of time. I do want to get into I wanted to hear this talks about. I sent you some questions, not my questions. Got them straight off the internet. Google them.
Okay.
So we're gonna play a little game. I mean, I never played the Ethics Bowl, but let's try to play this. Let's see. Ask some questions here. What's a good one here? I just go with the first one. Okay. I love the way they worded this question. Would drug use be unethical if it were legal?
Mm.
What's your take on that?
Yeah. So obviously that's also a loaded question since like we're in the military and there's so
Yeah,
many
yeah, yeah.
restrictions around drug use that, even in certain states are not illegal. It's like, so there are things that
Like
are legal in the
marijuana, yeah.
military that aren't. Right. So I think, that's
Mhm.
an interesting take on it. But anyways, so from an ethics bowl lens, we do evaluate things in terms of how how well does this action align with the law. But there are a couple other lenses that you can
Mhm.
also use to kind of determine the morality or ethicality of a decision, such as to take a drug. So one of those is consequentialism. So what consequences will this have? Will this,
Right.
you know, if I have a family, will this make me less able to provide for that family or fulfill, other familial duties that I might identify? Taking this drug, will this cause me to go outside and, enact violence against, other people? Things along
Or
those lines. Like what
driving, have an
impacts?
accident, something.
Right. Exactly. So like, what are the consequences of this action? Another lens that you can take it um, to evaluate this is like, what are my rights? So do I see
Yeah,
it as
freedom.
a right?
Hmm.
Right. Do I see this as like a right, whether it's embedded in law or not, to take drugs to put into my body what I want to put into my body, regardless of the consequences, for example. Another aspect of it is like a more virtue-based approach. So like, am I following the virtue of I don't know what you would call it, but like a sober lifestyle? And
Hmm.
regardless of the impact of sobriety, regardless of you know any rights argument, if I just want to embody the virtue of sobriety in my life, how does taking drugs compare to that? So I think those are just a few examples of the different approaches you can use. And I can tell you how it lines up with each approach. And I can try to say maybe what I would agree with the most. But
Right.
I think, from a more consequence oriented way, it depends on which drug, right? Like if
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah.
marijuana versus ecstasy versus cocaine,
Heroin,
it'll,
yeah.
yeah, it'll have different consequences. Is this more
Steroids.
addictive? Right.
That's a good one
Steroids,
too,
like,
yeah.
is this something that, will completely derail my life? Will it drain my bank account because it's, hyper addictive versus a substance that's less addictive, might even have, health benefits. I was just watching a documentary the other day on how psychedelic mushrooms might have different
Yeah,
health
yeah.
benefits to easing
I have a
different
friend, if you're
conditions.
interested, he's a shaman. He's on a few of my podcast episodes that they do the
Oh,
ayahuasca.
well,
And
yeah.
there's a lot of studies saying the mental health aspects, like helping with I want to say depression, maybe something else. I can't remember with
Mhm.
that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'll have to get the title of that episode from you so I can listen to it. I'll be interested in that. But so other substances will just have other consequences. And do I want those consequences in my life? From my perspective, if I take a drug, I'm gonna get kicked out of the military. Like,
Yeah, that's a
so,
whole other
you
thing.
know,
Yeah. Well, I mean,
and
in
that's
the frame of this question, it's if they were legal. I'm guessing it's federally legal. But I like the conflict of it being illegal, because once we made it illegal, now we have these big gangs, we have cartels who have so much money, so much influence, and they're not regulated by anything. They're just doing whatever they want. If they don't like you, they kill you.
right.
They'll kidnap you.
Yeah.
And that wouldn't have happened had we had some sort of control over these substances, instead of trying to go,
Yeah.
we're gonna go to war with drugs.
Yeah, for sure. And I think having that system that was created to respond to the legality of drugs definitely had unintended consequences in itself, and maybe marginalized communities to make it a worse problem,
Definitely,
and maybe
definitely,
make
yeah.
it like one of the only things to pursue in order to provide for your family, maybe along those lines, or
Yeah.
stay safe from
Or
you know
making areas, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York in the 80s. Just
mhm,
crack blew up. And I
yeah.
remember, this is gonna sound weird to you, but I remember being a young kid sitting on my stoop, because I was really young, so I didn't venture far from my stoop at that time. But I
Mhm,
remember seeing the older kids, which in my mind, I guess they're high school age, right?
mhm,
And being like, wow, I really look up to these guys. They dress well, they talk well, then I want to be like these people. something like that. I don't know, I'm a kid, right? And,
Yeah.
this is, I guess, the summertime or something like that. And, in the wintertime, it's really cold, so you don't go out as much.
Mhm.
And then it's sort of like the groundhog, the sun comes up, it's warm, you can go out. I could get out of
Yeah.
my cubby hole as a kid, and I'm back on my
Yeah.
porch, and everything changed. Those same
Mm,
kids weren't around. Some that
mm,
were didn't look good. And
mm.
as a kid, I recognized that difference. That thing destroyed that kid,
Wow.
those kids, I don't know what happened to them. I kind of know what happened to them, but the whole neighborhood just changed. It was
Yeah.
just horrible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a really interesting. Chris, I'm sorry I had to go see that happen, honestly, but I think
Yeah.
that really illustrates, like, and that's probably, like you said, crack, like a specific substance. So I think drug use, you could say alcohol is a drug, for example, like,
Yeah.
and that's not necessarily illegal, but maybe
Aspirin.
personally,
Yeah.
right, like maybe personally it has different consequences for me, and so I would have to make it more specific to what type of substance. But if it had the consequence of derailing, my goals personally, or you know uh, negatively impacting my community or my, the people who love me, I think it would be unethical, and then just based off like where my values lie. And then but if I didn't care about that, like, I think I if you didn't care about like its impact on others or yourself in comparison to, like, your goals, maybe I think that everybody is entitled to put into their body what they want to put into, and at the end
Yeah.
of the
I'm
day, like,
sort of off
that's what,
that same train of
yeah,
thought.
that's what
Yeah.
I believe too. But yeah, so that's where I lie, but you can see different lenses to look through to see where you might
Yeah.
lie on that.
Yeah. I get other people's perspective, and I respect it, because I'm just kind of that
Mhm.
guy. All right, we're gonna wrap it up here soon. Let's do the
Okay.
last little thing here. Let's do the question is, how far should everyone's right to privacy go? This is
Mm.
a tough one. Being with now we're in this cell phone, social media, everything we're saying, even though I hit the record button, was probably being recorded before I
Yeah.
even hit the record button. And I think
Yeah.
privacy, because it's, the founders didn't specifically put that in the
Mhm.
Constitution. It's sort of implied, and depending who you talk to, they say it has no bearing on the Constitution or our rights or
Mhm.
whatever. Okay, Ethics
Yeah.
Bowl, this question. What do you think here about this?
How far should everyone's right to privacy go? Well, I think, with things such as, the Patriot Act post 9/11, where a lot of authority was given to the federal government to um, spy on its citizens, if that's the terminology you want to use, or have access to a lot of personal information. I think it was justified, in terms of, this will help prevent future
The way they
crimes of
framed it,
this
right,
magnitude.
right.
Right, exactly. So I think from my perspective, and again, I like to always make the distinction between, like, this is a line of question you could go down versus this is where I land.
Yeah, there's no
But
specific right answer, right? Yeah.
right, for me personally, I believe in, like, a right to privacy can be extended to like an extremely far extent, and if you want to live off the grid in the middle of the woods, like, I think you are entitled to do so, as long as you are not um, actively infringing upon others' rights that either are in law or that you personally agree with. So, kind of my rule of thumb is I'm not gonna say somebody does not have a right that I identify for myself. So if, for example, you're living out in the woods and you think you have a right to live unaccosted, and you have a right to just be in your cabin without anybody like talking to you, then you need to respect if somebody else like has that preference to embody
Right.
that right.
Does your
And
rights trump my rights? Kind of
right,
question, right? Okay.
exactly. And so, wherever you land on the rights that you identify for yourself, I think that is fair, as long as it's not a double standard, and as long as you identify for that for other people, and you don't. If somebody wants to, enact that right, you're not trying to infringe upon it.
Yeah.
So that's where I land. But I know if you want to take a more federally oriented perspective, you might say that we have no right to privacy, or even because we have the potential to violate maybe certain laws, such as not blowing up a building,
Right.
because there's that potential. The government has the right to preemptively start surveilling you to prevent that from happening, even if you're not going to, even if you're not intending to, just
Like
because
profiling
you
certain
could.
people or
Right.
okay.
Because there are people who would. And
Right.
I don't necessarily agree with that. I think that just creates, that kind of that culture of fear that I was talking about beforehand as well. But
Well, you brought up
that's what I think.
the Patriot Act, 9/11. What about COVID? People having
Mm.
to prove that they've been vaccinated to go to certain establishments or jobs or whatever, and medical is a big thing. Like, like you don't have to expose whatever treatments or whatever you're getting, at work, you
Yeah,
know?
I think that's a really big topic that I haven't fully fleshed out for myself, because the issue is so proximate. I think I haven't been able to take that like
Yeah.
intellectual distance to
Yeah.
see it with more objectivity. But I think overall, um, I do feel a sense of unease personally when it comes to some of the restrictions that were proposed upon those who did not get the vaccine or did not get the booster.
Mhm.
However, I also think, you know, what I find interesting is that there was kind of a collectively recognized norm
Mhm.
of, okay, we get flu shots, we get these shots when you're a baby, you get these shots. It's kind of
Vaccines,
an
right?
unquestioned thing that, with this, virus in particular, I think, and this vaccine in particular, I think there are, there's a contrasting reaction to assuming it as like a normal thing to do within society, or unquestioningly allowing it to happen in a way that other vaccines happen. And maybe I think a lot of people have arguments like, we don't know the impact, it wasn't
Right.
experimented as long. Like I understand what they're saying, but I think there was a skepticism off the bat in certain groups or certain people to taking the vaccine in a way that they did not apply that same skepticism to other
Yeah.
vaccines in their life, that I think is interesting.
But didn't it say something about us, about our society, though? Like there's a shift, there's a change. I think it started,
Mm,
maybe it didn't start, but I remember, you know, Trump being elected because he wasn't conventional at all. Whatever your
mhm,
politics are about him, he was
mhm,
unconventional. I think it said something about our society, about they were, for a lot of people who voted for him, didn't think he would make a good president. They were sort of just
mhm,
saying a big F you to the system by voting for him,
mm,
regardless of what you think of kind of president that he was. Because I think that's a
mhm.
fact, right? I'm not saying something that's an opinion, but
Right.
also the distrust for government, I think, is where
Mhm.
this whole thing with the vaccination comes from. People just
Yeah.
really, it showed that they just don't, yeah, for corporations, for government, they just have this opinion that it's us versus them, and they're out to get us. Would you
Yeah.
agree with that, or
Yeah.
what do you think about?
I do. I mean, from my vantage point, at least, it does seem as though there's a larger extent of distrust for a lot of conventionally, um, you know, trusted sources. And I think that comes from maybe a level of disillusionment within our society. The fact that you can't depend on, Uncle Sam to do X, Y, Z. You can't depend on the government to always have your back, if you will, because of different controversies like Snowden, maybe that come to
Yeah,
light,
yeah.
or
Or
things
news
along those lines.
organizations, they seem to be
Right. Or
very
news
biased.
organization.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that, or even, I mean, this is kind of taking a very big tangent, but things such as um, climate change, like whatever you believe is causing it is changing. And I think a lot of people feel as though if there is a way to address it, it would be the government's job to. And if it,
Right.
if we should have done it sooner, why didn't the government do it sooner? I mean,
Mhm.
even with involvements in different world conflicts, I think there's a level of disillusionment with this isn't, a extremely maybe ideal principled, like we're fighting for our nation's safety involvement in certain conflicts. Maybe it's, in addition to that consideration, also for natural resources or
Yeah.
because of a sense of imperialism. And so I think that there's this revisionist history that's coming up, to kind of maybe take a step back and say, wait a second, these narratives that we've used for centuries to kind of justify our existence as a nation and have this narrative of being kind of that, the country in the world to be a citizen of, and to be, established on such just principles. I think there's a lot of questioning of that recently in many ways, that is probably contributing to that distrust.
Yes, man. Awesome. Thank you for having me. Thank you for doing this. I think we fixed the world.
Yeah,
Like we solved all the
I
world's
think we fixed
problems.
the-
It's done. We did it.
Yeah.
You're welcome, America. Okay,
And
man. Thank you
Korea.
so much.
Thank you, Sarah.